So Donald Trump won the 2024 election in a manner that I didn't think anybody truly saw coming, if I'm going to be completely honest. Because he won not just the electoral college vote, but he won the popular vote as well. And I did not see that coming. I don't think most people did, if I'm going to be completely honest. But yeah, it is insane. I remember being up at like 2 or 3, just looking, just like refreshing every now and again, just to see, what state was won. And I forget which one he won that put him to like 267. But it was like at that moment where it was just like, yeah, he won. Because there were still a few states that weren't being counted yet, but it was like, if he wins one of them, he wins. And he was projected to win most of them. So he won basically in a landslide, doing something that Republicans haven't been able to do in terms of the presidential election in almost over a decade now, which was win the popular vote. But now we enter into a new phase, and I don't know. I don't even know what we're gonna do. He has been making statements left, right, and center of what he wants to do when he gets to office. Bring prayer back into schools or whatever. Fucking weird shit. He already said that he is going to start doing mass deportations on day one. So I don't know. We'll probably get to that in another video more than likely. But I want to see and just kind of go over what the left's reaction to this is. Because the right, I feel like, hasn't been making that much of a statement. I think they've been mostly just celebrating. And because of that, people on the left have been kind of losing it. And in terms of like, they're just kind of acting like, oh, how could this have failed? How could have Kamala Harris lost this election? And there has been some, conspiracy theorists being like, oh, it was stolen, but it's not as much as like, what Republicans did with, January 6th leading up to that. And even not as far as like the Russiagate stuff, shit like that. But when it comes to this, I think most people understand why this election did not go into the favor of Kamala Harris. But left-leaning media has not been able to really figure that out. So we're just gonna, kind of see how the left-wing media is handling this. But we are gonna start off with a clip from Fox News, because like this clip right here is a sentiment that will be shared in later clips. I pulled up a bunch of them. Some of them we may not even watch. It just depends. But let's start with this one.
How can progressives win again? By looking at what went wrong here, by taking this moment and allowing it not to be a retrenchment of the idea of, half of Americans want a fascist regime. They don't. They want a good life for themselves and their families, and actually looking in the mirror. It turns out that running on these extraordinarily niche issues like gender fluidity or defunding the police, or any number of things that people in places where I live get extremely excited about, don't actually matter or frankly feel profoundly out of touch.
Yeah. And here's the thing, when the way she started off that statement is correct. People want a better life. I don't think there are a lot of people that voted for Trump because they want to do these mass deportations. I think there's a lot of people who just saw that Kamala Harris wasn't offering a lot when it came to like, economic policies that would actually help them out, and went for Trump instead. I mean, it's stupid to think Trump would be good for the economy, but he at least lies to them that it will be good. But then we have the second statement, the one that is, quoted here. It turns out running on these extraordinarily niche issues like gender fluidity or defunding the police don't actually matter. That's not what happened. That's not even what they ran on. They never said they wanted to defund the police, and they never really brought up gender fluidity as like a major topic. Like, if you ask someone who was paying attention to the Kamala Harris campaign, at least somewhat, they probably wouldn't, repeat this stuff like that's what they're, campaign is about. Like, when you look at the most basic stuff they talk about, they mentioned, the what was it, the 5,000 or 50,000 for startups thing way more often than any of these issues. Like, that's it. Which also played into a role why they didn't win. That's why they didn't win. Like, those are the niche issues they kept bringing up that caused them to lose. Like the startups. Like, who cares about that? Not everyone wants to be a business owner. There were some polls that came out about some of the demographic in the swing states, Pennsylvania and Georgia, showing that most of the votes coming for Trump were from white people, essentially. And this comes mostly due to the factor that a lot of people Pennsylvania, there was like a 54% Latino men. That this comes after the fact that most people, especially with this poll, they saw this 20% from black men and immediately started blaming them. They were like, oh my god, we gotta talk about black men. I was like, it's 20% of the vote that voted for Trump. Most of them voted for Harris. What are you talking about? You're missing out this like big fucking demographic right here in the top. And even with like Latino men, like, yeah, it's majority, but it's not a lot. It should be, it should be way less than 54. It should be way less than 45, but still, like, they're looking at these niche individuals while missing the big white spot right up here. So yeah, there was like people immediately were trying to come out from this and make it like a race issue and be like, oh, black men are the reason why Trump won.
And I think it's important to say that, anyone who
Oh my god, I remember this. This woman has just been full of bad takes left, right, and center. Like, she made a statement where she was like, oh, like, my generation, the millennials that grew up on WWE was the ones who got Trump the vote. And I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Why are you like going after the WWE with this quote?
And I think it's important to say that, anyone who has experienced or been in the United States for any period of time and experienced this country's history and knows it cannot have believed that it would be easy to elect a woman president, let alone a woman of color. Let's just be.
That's definitely true. There are definitely going to be people who weren't going to vote for her just because she was a black woman. Like, that's double jeopardy right there. There are definitely people who aren't going to, vote for her on that, but there probably will definitely be people who would vote for her even with those problems if she just had good economic policies. Yes, racism and misogyny is definitely a real thing, but, I think the big problem that came with the Harris campaign is that they just didn't have a lot of policies that they were really upfront about that would help everyday people. There was price gouging, but they didn't mention it as much as they should have. There was like, lowering the cost of insulin and shit with healthcare that they could have brought up, but they didn't really bring it up for the majority of their campaign.
Be clear. And nothing that was true yesterday about how flawlessly this campaign was run is not
flawlessly. If it was so flawless, then why did they lose? A flawless campaign doesn't lose.
True now. This really was an historic, flawlessly run campaign. Queen Latifah never endorses anyone. She came out and endorsed. She had every prominent celebrity voice. She had the Taylor Swiftie, she had the Swifties. She had the Beehive. Like, you couldn't.
No, but nobody cares about that. The Taylor Swift vote is not going to get you. Like, let's be honest. This is so like chronically, like, not even online. This is just like believing that like celebrity culture and celebrity endorsements really means anything. Like, yeah, it might affect some people, but I don't think it's gonna affect that many people. And also, I wouldn't be surprised if a fair amount of Swifties actually voted for Trump. Let's just go back to this. Where was it? Let's just go back to this little graph right here. Both in Pennsylvania and Georgia, majority of white women voted for Trump. All right, but yeah, like, I've just been seeing this woman just fucking losing it. We also have this one where this woman is blaming pro-Palestine protesters for essentially losing them the election.
These protests on college campuses, women in the suburbs are horrified when they see Jewish kids getting bullied and getting intimidated by these protesters who are then defended by elitist academics who are supposed to be the people rearing them up and looking out for them. That scares people. That
Yeah, they
feels like
definitely, they were definitely protecting these protesters when they sent in the police to brutalize them and arrest them. That was protecting them.
shift that goes so far out of the mainstream of where the country wants to be. And I think that's one of the areas that the room was just misread by Democrats. These protests on
Jesus
college
Christ, yeah. The Kamala Harris campaign was too pro-Palestine, and that's another thing. Let me see if I can look it up. Maybe I saved it. That's another thing, is that there were people who, after this, after the results came in, have been essentially been like, oh well, they've been blaming like pro-Palestine people. They've been blaming Muslims from like Michigan who didn't want to vote for Harris because like of course they didn't. Like Harris offered them nothing. She just had to be at least somewhat pro-Palestine, but even then she could barely do that. So there's been like people like this right here. Drinking Starbucks again for the first time in 3 years because I thought we would come together for everyone, but we were left hanging. And this one, enjoying my Starbucks guilt-free, enjoying my Starbucks skill-free, knowing no one stood in solidarity with us. Like, it's these people who, their activism, their support of something hinges on whether it affects them or not. And look, I know these two people in these pictures are black women. I'm a white man. Obviously, they're going to suffer a lot from what is going to come with Trump and his policies too. Definitely. But it's like, regardless of who you are, if your activism, if your support can just switch like this, if you no longer benefit from it, then you don't actually care about it. You just care about yourself in that matter. And this is also something like, I'm crying because the main reason we were boycotting Starbucks is because they were literally union busting, which is a very American problem. Oh no, Blue Maca is back to drinking Starbucks and blaming Palestinians for not voting for a candidate who is funding the killing of other people. Are you really fucking surprised? Yeah, it's just Blue MAGA. These people who are just like, no, I'm ride or die with the Dems. Like, nothing they can do is wrong, and I will go center right with them as much as I possibly can.
They stormed the Capitol and you stormed the Starbucks. They're recognized by their...
Oh, I saw this one. I love this one. This one's great.
They have their January 6th and you have your November 7th. They stormed the Capitol and you stormed the Starbucks. They're recognized by their red hats. You're recognized by your blue friendship bracelets. That one's a little odd. They yelled, "This is your fault! We want America back!" You yelled, "This is your fault! Get out of my country!"
Oh my
they
god, yeah.
screamed and shouted quotes of democracy.
It's literally, yeah, it's Blue MAGA. That's the thing. Like, the more far right, well, not far right, the more center right the Democratic Party gets, the more their loyal followers, their Blue MAGA is going to get as well, and it's going to get completely unhinged. Like some of their social media personalities, like Olivia Juliana, I'm not sure about Harry Hassan. I don't really follow him that much. Olivia will sometimes show up on my feed every now and again when people are dunking on her for saying the stupidest shit. But like some of these Blue MAGA people are just completely unhinged, and you can just tell they don't care about anyone but themselves. Like, they can never take blame. They can never, criticize their own party. They just continuously have to be like, how can we shit on the leftists? The people on the left. And like, this is what they resort to.
Latinos for Trump, it is time to embrace the consequences of your actions. I've always been a firm believer of fighting fire with fire. If somebody goes low, I'll go lower. Now, with that being said, I know for a fact that most Latinos for Trump have undocumented family members, whether that be their parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, etc. So if you know of a Latino who voted for Trump, I urge you to call this number and report said family members. It's time that these Latinos...
Yeah, call ICE on these undocumented family members of these Trump supporters who couldn't vote and who didn't vote for Trump because they can't vote. Like, it's just so abnormally cruel. Like, imagine being like, oh no, I'm gonna vote for this, candidate because I believe they're gonna do like less harm, like they're less harmful than the other guy. But then going out here and advocating for something that is incredibly harmful to people who did nothing to deserve it, except for have a family member who's a dumbass.
For Trump get a taste of their own medicine and a taste of poetic justice. Now, I know what you may be thinking, Angel, this is extreme, and I agree. But extreme problems call for extreme solutions. And unfortunately, many innocent people are going to be affected by this, but you can't be that innocent if you raised a Latino for Trump.
Okay, you're just spouting out Trump shit like right now. Like there's no difference between you and one of those Latinos for Trump. Like at this rate, when you're just like, no, literally, like if you know someone who voted for Trump who has an undocumented family member, call ICE on them. Like what's, like the only difference is that you're not wearing a red hat right now. What's different between that and a Trump supporter? Just so fucking stupid. So like needlessly cruel. Yeah, some people are blaming Bernie Sanders and AOC.
It's also fascinating to hear from somebody like Bernie Sanders in this moment, because remember, over the course of the last 107 days, as Vice President Harris largely tacked to the middle on a lot of issues. That was something that came up again and again. She was pressed on the policy differences between her run in 2019 when the Democratic Party was in a more progressive place. People like Bernie Sanders, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't press on that, right? They gave her the space to be able to move to a more centrist position, to give that olive branch to more moderates, to try to win over those disaffected Republicans. Boy, with that statement from Bernie Sanders, that's done. Yeah. That's over. And I think that's a real indication of the grappling inside the Democratic Party that's going to unfold as.
Oh yeah, this was before her concession speech. During election night, she was supposed to speak. I forget where exactly it was, but she refused to. So all of her supporters that were out there just had to leave, I guess. Discussing people like Bernie Sanders and AOC not pressing and giving VP Harris the space to move to the right. Like, if you're blaming AOC and Bernie for the mistakes of the Harris campaign, then you're just dumb. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, AOC and Bernie are probably, like, honestly one of the most, like, progressive, like, consistently progressive voices in their field. The big problem with the Harris campaign was her move to the right. Like, trying to get those moderate voices, that moderate space, ultimately just backfired because, like, if you're gonna repeat if you're just gonna repeat stuff that Trump says, like with the border crisis, whatever, then they're just gonna go vote for Trump. Like, you're just giving merit to those issues that he brings up. And, like, I don't know, it was just so dog shit. And honestly, like, again, this is just the media trying to, like, point at the progressive side who basically had no voice in this campaign and just being like, it's your fault.
A lot of young people are also fed up with very super progressive attitudes. I think.
Sure.
I think the Democrats, Joe, going back to your initial question, and you may disagree with this, I think they need to move to the center. I think the
what
center.
What does that mean, though? When you say they need to move to the center, what do they need? Are you saying that they should?
They already moved to the center. They basically are the center now. Like, what are we talking about? Like, this is what, like, neoliberalism gets you. Like, they are firmly at the center at this point. Being a liberal is essentially the same thing as being a centrist, if we're going to be honest at this point. Like, the further that the right goes in terms of how far right they can be, liberals continue just to push right with them without getting any pushback, to the point where they are the center. They are just the center at this point. It's just, I don't know. But this is also, like, the thing with, like, MSNBC and CNN as well. Most of the people in these clips very likely could just be former Republicans, like former Republicans or current Republicans as well, because for some reason they like force these people onto every single show that they have, to the point where there's like a 50% chance you might see them on any given hour of these networks. And then, like, and it just goes to show, like, how far, like, how right-leaning our media is getting. Like, no matter where you go on, you know, the internet nowadays, even when you look at the news networks, conservatives dominate. Like, you don't see a lot of liberals, a lot of Democrats on Fox. There's like that one girl that they have on the 5, and that's about it. But on CNN, on MSNBC, they always make sure to have one person on whatever show they're doing, like one run Republican who just says the most outlandish shit of like what the Democrats need to do. And, you know, surprise, surprise, their idea is they should just be right wing. It's so fucking dumb. Like, you don't see that many progressive voices anymore on these shows as much as you see conservatives and Republicans. And, like, you know, going back to what I was saying, like how right-leaning our media is now, you know, I was on Instagram, you know, Facebook is insanely right-leaning, but, like, I go on Instagram, I go on Twitter, and I'm seeing constant, like, right shit, and I don't follow right-wing accounts at all, for the most part. Like, I just don't. Like, my Instagram is very different from my Twitter, and I still get the same amount. Like, I get Daily Wire ads, and especially on fucking, like, Twitter, I get, like, stupid alt-right crypto shit. Just being on the internet now, and just seeing media in general, it's gotten more right-leaning, and there's not a lot of, like opposition to that.
Should not support trans people. Like, let's just be specific, because that's what the ads are doing. So if the analysis and the immediate aftermath is they have to move to the center, I mean, what is the center? Because I disagree that is it, but I want to hear what is the center, because you're not the only person, to be clear, I've heard say that. Yeah. I've heard, you know, the Democrats been in my phone this morning.
The center are the people I described before. I'm not even talking about an issue. We can talk about issues. The people I described before who bounce back and forth, who play between the 45-yard lines, that tends to win elections. If you look historically where it is. So,
okay, so yeah, he's not even giving an answer. Just nonsense.
The Washington Post, Matt Bai, writes in part, I do think the prosecutions fed a narrative of Trump as a victim. I also think Democrats dug themselves into a hole on cultural issues and identity politics. Trump's vicious transgender ad in the closing.
Yeah, I wonder. Just so fucking dumb. Also, like, the Washington Post literally not that long ago had a whole thing of being like they refuse to allow anyone to endorse Kamala Harris. So yeah, they're not going to be the first source I go to for accurate news. Trump's vicious transgender ad in the closing weeks, she's for they, them, he's for you, was probably the most effective of the cycle.
For they, them, he's for you, was probably the most effective of the cycle. I think that probably landed with a lot of tradition.
I think that probably... You think. So it's just an opinion piece that they're gonna try to run with fact? I don't know. I think that's just so fucking stupid. Let's get to the actual part where they talk about it.
Because you have that stacked on top of what happened on college campuses this fall, stacked on top of what's been happening on college campuses over the past 4 or 5 years. I have said this on the air. And every time I've said it, people said, oh, you're just saying that because you're a white conservative. No.
Because you are.
No, I'm just...
That's literally just what white conservatives say.
Saying it because every Democrat that we have ever sat down with dinner with over the past 5 years who have kids that go to colleges say their kids are afraid to speak in class because they'll be canceled.
About what? Oh my God, it's just the dumbest shit. Like, no, that definitely doesn't happen. We don't even need to react any further to this. Like, that's just so fucking stupid. But again, trying to be like, oh yeah, it's the pro-Palestine, it's the trans people.
No, I'm going to speak some hard truths to my friends in the Democratic Party. This is not Joe Biden's fault. It's not Kamala Harris's fault. It's not Barack Obama's fault. It is the fault of the Democratic Party in not knowing how to communicate effectively to voters. We are not the party of common sense, which is what the message that voters sent to us.
Jesus
For
Christ.
a number of reasons. For a number of reasons, we don't know how to speak to voters. When we address Latino, and language has meaning. When we address Latino voters as Latinx, for instance, because that's the politically correct thing to do. It makes them...
Does anyone use Latinx? Like, I feel like that was a thing for like a second. And then people were just kind of like, eh. Like, trying to bring up Latinx discourse as to why Harris lost is so fucking stupid.
Think that we don't even live on the same planet as they do. When we are too afraid to say that, hey, college kids, if you're trashing a campus at Columbia University because you're unhappy about some sort of policy and you're taking over a university.
Yeah, I love how, tens of thousands of Palestinians dying is just some policy.
And you're trashing it and preventing other students from learning, that is unacceptable. But we're so worried.
Literally, that's not happening. Like when it came to the college campus, like camps, they were always out of the way. Like they were on public property, they did not take up space. It was just people who wanted to make a big deal out of it and try to like paint it as this sort of like troublesome thing. Those were the only instances, like people who were deliberately trying to do that. Like there was that one guy who was like, "Oh, they're trying to stop me from going to class," making a big deal out of it while he has his like friend film him or something. When that wasn't the case, there was multiple sources being like, "No, he was trying to get into the camp without approval," and they were trying to like deal with him in a peaceful way, but he just kept riling up.
About alienating one or another cohort.
And that guy was literally seen with like counter protesters not that long afterwards, with like violent counter protesters who like planned on, starting panic.
Coalition that we don't know what to say when normal people look at that and say, wait a second, I send my kids to college so they can learn, not so that they can burn buildings and trash lawns, right?
Jesus Christ. I believe this is also a former Republican. Just again, just fucking trashy. And I don't know, I feel like this has more of a reason to why Harris probably lost, at least in Michigan, than some college campus protesters.
Let me talk about the hardest issue here in Michigan is the Middle East. Hamas did not care about a homeland for the Palestinians. They wanted to kill Israelis and make Israel uninhabitable. Well, I got news for them. They were there first. Before there was, their faith existed.
Jesus Christ.
They were there. In the time of King David, in the southernmost.
Yeah, maybe this played more of effect to why Harris didn't win Michigan at the very least, because they sent Bill Clinton to be like, Palestinians are barbarians that just want to kill Jews. And, Israelis, they were there first. Like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, maybe that played more into effect why she didn't even get Michigan. Or like people in Dearborn, because they had this guy go there and was just like, yeah, Arabs are barbarians who just want to murder. To me, it's just so painfully obvious why they lost. It's painfully obvious. They just didn't run a good campaign. That's it. It was dog shit from the very beginning when they couldn't, well, not even from the very beginning. They had a lot of momentum in the very beginning, even when they didn't really have like solid policy, like, or any policy at all. Just from like them switching out Joe for Harris was insanely popular when it started, and they could have ride that momentum, but at the DNC, that momentum stopped dead in its tracks. Not only did they stop a pro-Palestine representative to speak in and give a speech that was very tame and was approved ahead of time. Not only did she go up on stage and say that they were going to have the most lethal fighting force in all of America, which drove a lot of people away, especially when, again, they refused to allow a representative of the pro-Palestine movement to speak when America is currently funding a genocide in Gaza, when none of her policies that she regularly spouts on her campaign would actually help everyday people. Again, there was price gouging, there was lowering the price of insulin, but she did not focus on those. She, for some fucking reason, focused on bipartisanship, the border, and small businesses. That's it. She wanted to focus on the suburbs people who were more than likely going to vote for Trump anyways, because guess what? Republicans vote for Republicans. And instead of paying attention to a base that didn't have faith in her, that were more than likely not going to vote for her, if she didn't switch up and try to act in their best interest, she decided to push against this small niche group of people who weren't going to vote for her more than likely anyways. Like, going to that center right, the never Trumpers, isn't going to get you far. But there is a large group of people, even people on the right, who might actually vote for you if you do spout some of this rhetoric that would actually help them, even if it comes from a progressive point of view. Like, at the end of the day, a large message that I've heard about this election is that people Like, the people who voted for Trump believe that he will be better on the economy. And that's, that's obviously stupid. But it's not just stupid from a Trump standpoint. It's stupid from a Harris standpoint. Because the fact that Harris couldn't even communicate a better economic policy than Trump that people resonated with is terrible. Price gouging was successful. It was. That rhetoric was successful, and she barely brought it up. I don't know where we're going to go from here. Again, I'm not excited for 4 years of Trump, but we'll just have to see where this goes. But that's probably where I'll just leave it off. I was kind of hoping that after this, liberals would kind of have like a self-reflecting moment where they're just kind of like, maybe we need to start going more left. Like, maybe playing to the center-right field isn't going to work. But instead, no. They're just going to ignore all the data, all the research that proved that, being more progressive would have worked out for her if they wanted to win. And instead, they're just going to be like, no, we had to be more right-wing. We basically had to be Republicans at this point. So yeah, we'll just have to see where this goes.